Part 1B, Attitudes and Attitude Change. An attitude is a positive or negative evaluative reaction towards a stimulus, whether that's a person, an action, an object, a concept. And your attitude is supported by personal beliefs and values. So, for example, someone's attitude towards smoking, like the diagram on the right, you can see that the positive evaluation reduces social discomfort, eases studying, are in yellow there. And then the 5 others are negative evaluative reactions. Like friends dislike smoking, roommate dislikes smoking, makes you smell bad, expensive, health risks. Not that we sit and weigh these things out, but they all become part of our belief system, and they help direct what our evaluation is going to be towards that thing, right? So in this situation, you're more than likely going to have more of a negative attitude towards smoking. Okay, so how do these attitudes influence our behavior? Well, 3 factors explain why we have strong or weak reactions in different situations. The attitude behavior relationship is strongest when 1. Counteracting situational factors are weak. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the theory of planned behavior on the next slide. Secondly, we are aware of attitudes and they are strongly held, and we think about the attitudes before acting. And then third, general attitudes predict general behavior, and specific attitudes predict specific behavior. Now, the example in the text, I admit, seems a little confusing with regards to general attitudes predict general behavior. And what it's saying is that general attitudes, like the example with regards to religion, and then they had a pile of specific behaviors such as praying and attending services and whatnot. If they had a general attitude around a religion, it just predicts general behavior around religion. If you have very specific attitudes around a religion, it's more highly correlated with very specific behaviors around religion. And I hope that helps. Do attitudes influence our behavior? Continued. So the theory of planned behavior, this states the intention to engage in a behavior is strongest when we have a positive attitude towards that behavior, subjective norms or perceptions of others support this attitude, and we believe that the behavior is under our personal control. And they list some situations where they've been able to predict, such as people who become smokers, use of condoms, attend church, donate blood, seek out therapy. And, it makes sense. So, for example, attending church. So people are more likely to be engaged in this behavior if they have a positive attitude towards the behavior of going. Subjective norms, I guess the people around you, the people in your social circle, maybe they also go and encourage you to go. And then also if you believe that that behavior is under your personal control. So those things would sort of support the idea that like your behavior would be strongest when those 3 things are in check. We may also come to develop attitudes that are consistent with how we behave. Now, what do I mean by that? It means you engage in a behavior of some kind, and you change your attitude to match that behavior. Because if they don't match, if your behavior and your attitude don't match, then it becomes very uncomfortable, right? And then we're going to talk about cognitive dissonance theory. For example, you get a job and you are, you're working at Dollarama, okay? You really didn't want to work there, but you can't find anything else. So you're going to work at Dollarama. Oh, big bug. Oh my God. Sorry. Okay. So you get the job at Dollarama. You don't really want to do this. You go in there, you start doing your job. and you're working there for 8 hours a day. Now, if you continue to have the attitude that working at Dollarama is awful, you're going to be very uncomfortable, right? So you would be much better off, you don't necessarily do it intentionally either, but you'll be much better off to match your behavior with your attitude by changing your attitude. And now all of a sudden, hey, you know what? It's kind of cool. You get to see all the stuff at Dollarama. You get to see all the really neat stuff that comes in. It's actually not that bad. I don't mind working at Dollarama. Now I tell my friends I don't mind, right? So now my attitude matches my behavior. So cognitive dissonance theory is when you strive for consistency in cognitions. When you have two inconsistent cognitions, you have cognitive dissonance. Dissonance leads to motivation to change one cognition or add new ones. So being uncomfortable causes you to change your behavior or change your thoughts. The example in the text, page 491, about the laboratory experiment is very similar to my Dollarama example. So the participant comes in, does a horribly boring experiment, but then is told to tell the next person that's coming in that it was interesting. It was important that the next person had a really positive attitude. So asking the person to lie. So they lied and said, yeah, that was really interesting. It was, awesome, whatnot. And then they left. I'm not going to go into details. You can read that. But the fact is, later on, they changed their opinion of the task in order for them to have cognitive, for everything to match, for their behavior and their attitude to match. They're honest, nice people, and they lied. So in order to even that out, they changed their mind and said that the task was actually interesting. And now those two things match. Self-perception theory. This theory states that we make inferences about our own attitudes by observing our own behavior. So we infer how we must feel from how we act. So, for example, in the text, they talk about how that participant told the new participant that the activity was actually very interesting. And so you're thinking after and thinking, oh, well, I told the person it was really interesting. Well, I must have thought it was interesting on some level. Like deep down, that must be what I was thinking or I must have enjoyed it at some level, or I wouldn't have been able to say that. So again, that's making inferences about our own attitudes. I must have liked it because I did that. We've discussed cognitive dissonance theory and self-perception theory. So which one of these theories best explains attitude change? And it's important to understand. If you understand how it works, then you can understand the difference. So dissonance theory better explains why people change their views after behaving in ways that openly contradict their clearly defined attitudes. When your behavior obviously contradicts your attitude, it's going to make you uncomfortable. That is cognitive dissonance theory. So in those situations, cognitive dissonance theory is the better explanation of attitude change. Self-perception theory, that's better used when the situation, it's not threatening, your self-worth or anything. Attitudes are a little weaker. It just, when your attitude and your behavior are slightly off, then self-perception theory is more, it's the aligning of the two. It's the aligning of the two at an easier level than cognitive dissonance theory, where you are very uncomfortable, if that makes sense. So the last section we're going to look at in terms of attitude change is persuasion. Persuasion involves a communicator who delivers a message through a channel to an audience with the surrounding context. And we're going to look at those three parts: the communicator, message, and audience. What is best at persuading, right? So research has found that the biggest thing with the communicator is the communicator credibility. How believable the communicator is key to effective persuasion. And there's two major components to that: expertise and trustworthiness. Other things that kind of come into play is whether the person is physically attractive, likable, and similar to us. So perhaps you can think of some uh, people in advertisements, right? Famous people in advertisements, they want them to be likable, they want them to be similar to us, they're physically attractive, and I mean, examples of that. And this is where in class would be more fun, and I can be asking you for examples. So let's see. Taylor Swift, she was spokesperson for Diet Coke. Who else? Beyonce did Pepsi, of course. Um, Justin Timberlake, spokesperson for McDonald's. Again, Jennifer Aniston, she does. Man, what's that skin cream? Anyways, that's why they get famous people who we can connect with, because they have communicator credibility and we trust them. Secondly is the message. Two-sided refutational approaches are most effective and perceived as less biased. What this means is that you don't ever, when you're trying to persuade, only state your side. You say both sides, right? So then, yeah, you perceive less biased. Extreme or moderate arguments. If the audience disagrees moderately with their view, it's best. So it's best to keep them, when you're trying to persuade them, in an area where your argument has just got a moderate amount of pushback. If you try to go too far and state things too strongly and have a strong degree of pushback, not as good at persuasion. Fear arousal works best when message invokes moderate to strong fear and low-cost ways to reduce the threat. So what does that mean? That means when you are trying to persuade someone, if you put a moderate amount of fear into your argument, like for them to evoke a moderate amount of fear in them, that's when it works best, because they're a little bit afraid and they'll consider your position. If you evoke too much fear, then they're more likely to reduce their anxiety by just discrediting your information or saying that, you are not trustworthy. There's ways to discredit the communicator at that point. And lastly, the audience. There's two routes to persuasion, how you're going to deliver your message: the central route to persuasion or the peripheral. So with some groups of people, some audiences, laying out the logistics of your argument will work best, right? That's the central route to persuasion: laying out the groundwork, laying out logically what your arguments are. And this results in a deeper foundation, lasts longer, predicts future behavior more successfully. There are other groups, however, other audiences that you're working with, where a peripheral route to persuasion would work better. They're not necessarily concerned with hearing all of your logistics in your argument. They're more influenced by other factors than the message. For example, they're more interested in what Taylor Swift has to say, or what Beyonce. Oh, Beyonce's talking, and Beyonce is trustworthy, and she's beautiful, and I really like her, and I'm not really listening to the logistics of her message. I will just side with her. Okay, so central route is logistics and all about the argument, whereas peripheral route is you're influenced by those other personality of the persuader. Okay, so under what condition will we follow the central route? Highest personal relevance and high involvement usually results in central processing. And what that means is that when the issue that is being debated, or when someone's trying to present an argument, If the content of that argument has high personal relevance for you, then you're more likely to want those logistics of the central processing route, right? You're going to want to hear the facts. You're going to want to hear all the information, okay? Under need for cognition, basically it's talking, I mean, some people have a high need for cognition. They want to hear the details. They want to hear, and they'll question your statistics and they'll question this and ask for references. Um, so those people are going to follow the central route. Low need for cognition. Some people just don't want to hear it. They're just not all that interested in the details. And those people are more likely to follow the peripheral route. So knowing who your audience is can help determine which route to use in order to be persuasive with them. And this last part is just a little bit more about your audience, right? People differ in their approach to new information. The text outlines uncertainty-oriented people and certainty-oriented people. I have to say this again. Uncertainty-oriented people, they look for new information, especially in situations that are new and unpredictable. They follow the central route when issues are personally relevant. Let's fix that. Certainty-oriented people, they avoid such situations, especially when the information is self-relevant. They rely on peripheral information and when the information is self-relevant and are more influenced by factors such as speaker attractiveness or expertise. Okay, so that's the end of part 1, social thinking and perception. It looks like a short part here, but it was actually a little longer. Talked about attribution theory, perceiving the causes of behavior. We talked about how attitudes and impressions are formed and maintained. And in this last section, we talked about attitudes and how they're formed, what they are, and how attitudes are changed. So in part 2, we will be looking at social influence.